All right, off we go. It's Thursday afternoon. This is OverDrive on TSN 1050, live on TSN 4. Aaron Korolnek in for Brian Hayes with my man Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star. Doogie's back after a 3-day hiatus, Dave, and the Leafs also back in action tonight across the network. A big evening here at TSN.
Leafs back in action. It feels like forever since they last played. Saturday night, and now we're at Thursday. Crazy break. Last break they get, really, between now and the playoffs.
It is full steam ahead for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Ilya Samsonov in goal tonight. Still no Mitch Marner. He's out with a mystery lower body injury. It'll be Tyler Bertuzzi up on the top line with Auston Matthews and Calle Jarnkrok. Matthews, 2 goals in his last 8 games, Dave. The pursuit of 70 is a little bit in question. He would need 16 in his last 18 to get there. I saw the host of this radio program, Brian Hayes, the customary host, will be back on Monday, talk about this with Jay Onwright last night, how, the hunt for 70 is a little bit in question here, but if anybody can do it, it's Auston Matthews, and what better time to get it going after that 3-day break, right?
Well, my memory is not great, so I looked it up, and you say if anybody can do it, he's done it, because the last time he got 60, the only time he got 60, the year he got 60, you know how many goals he got in his final 18 games?
16?
Precisely 16. He got 16 in his final 18 to finish off at 60. So who's to say he can't get 16 in his final 18 to finish off at 70?
And I think that is something that could very well come to fruition, Dave, as I remove this coffee cup from national television. Excellent work, Aaron. But the one concern I would have a couple of concerns. Number one, Mitch Marner's out right now. And we don't know how long he's going to be out for. Sheldon Keefe is a little bit vague in his description of Marner's injury. We know he hasn't skated, so he's definitely not playing tonight. Will he play on Saturday remains to be seen. But his line mates don't exactly scream offensive production either tonight. And 5-on-5 with Bertuzzi, with Calle Jarnkrok, who he's played with sparingly. Remember, Tyler Bertuzzi started the year on the top line with Matthews and Marner. Last year in the second half of the season, Matthews did play a lot with Calle Jarnkrok. But, this could be a power play game for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And you consider what Philadelphia has relinquished on the PP recently to opposing teams. I was there on Saturday night when Tampa just obliterated them and just destroyed their penalty kill. It was a 7-0 score. They gave up 3 to San Jose the next game, and now they're taking on the Toronto Maple Leafs without John Tortorella behind the bench. He will miss the second of 2 games in the suspension he received from his refusal to leave the bench. And I know Sheldon Keefe was talking about it today, how will that be disruptive for the Philadelphia Flyers? Tortorella not being there, and Torts is in the building, right? Like, it's not like he is completely removed from the process of the Philadelphia Flyers, but you do wonder, a guy like Torts, who's such a big personality and such a command over not only the hockey club, but seemingly the entire organization, what type of effect that could have on the Philadelphia Flyers tonight?
Yeah, for sure. Torts is a very big presence, let's say. That probably understates it, right? Like, when things aren't going the way he wants it to go, he lets you know quite quickly. And so, who knows? Maybe on the other hand, I've also heard people say that maybe it's a nice break from a guy who never ceases to get on your nerves and get off your back. So, but you're right about the power play game. Like, they need it to be a power play game because this power play has been struggling, right? What are they, 2? They're 1 for the last 16. They won those. They had that nice winning streak. They're 4-3 in their last 7, 1 for 16 on the power play. And when I look back, AK, at kind of what went wrong last year in the playoffs, why they went from the high of beating the Lightning to the low of just scoring 2 goals in 7 straight games, 5 of which came against the Florida Panthers in that really, weak kind of exit in the second round, the power play went kaput, right? The power play was nowhere to be found. I think there were 2 for their last 15 in the playoffs, and they couldn't find offense anywhere else, right? They're scoring 2 goals a game for 7 straight games. Penalty kill's another matter that hasn't been great either. So let's call it a special teams night. They got to get these special teams back on the rails because the penalty kill's been bad all year. Power play has been sporadic, I would say, even though it's elite. It's right up there in the top of the league, but it's had its moments where it just goes dry. And I guess that happens to every power play except, maybe the best, like the historic Oilers one that never seemed to miss. But that concerns me when you think about this team and how much they rely on that power play to score.
It has to be humming. It has to be humming. And you pointed out the stats last year, spot on. You think about the Oilers, last year where, they couldn't be stopped on the power play. And this year it's kind of pulled back a little bit.
Yeah.
Tampa and the Leafs fighting for the top spot on the power play. And that's the ultimate equalizer, right? If you're able to take advantage of those power play opportunities in the Stanley Cup playoffs, like the Leafs didn't do last year against Florida, but did do against Tampa, that's going to go a long way in determining your future. And you look at tonight's power play with Marner out, and we'll talk about Marner's absence and kind of how the Maple Leafs have really struggled without Mitch Marner in their lineup for the last 7 years.
Yeah.
Relative to some of the other top players, it's night and day. When Marner's out, the Leafs are much worse than when Morgan Riley's out, when Auston Matthews is out, when John Tavares is out. It's not even close. And I think in large part that's due to his multifaceted efforts. This guy plays in every single situation. Now, a lot more on the penalty kill than he did, let's say, 2 or 3 years ago.
For sure.
Now he's their top guy, one of their top guys on the penalty kill. But 14, 13, and 4 are the Maple Leafs without Mitch Marner over his tenure as a Toronto Maple Leaf. 39, 15, and 4. How about me recalling these numbers off the top of my head?
Really
Very
good.
impressive. That's a University of Western Ontario student, much like yourself. Shout out to Western. A couple of Western boys here on OverDrive. But tonight, without Marner, Calle Yarncroke up on the top unit, and Mitch Marner. Sheldon Keefe talked about why it's Calle Yarncroke as opposed to maybe Tyler Bertuzzi.
Yeah.
And the answer was he's a right-handed shot. And when you consider some of the angles and how the Maple Leafs want to set up on their power play, that makes sense. And listen, Calle Yarncroke's a really important piece for this Toronto Maple Leafs team. He's a guy who can move up and down the lineup. Again, we're going to see him on the top line tonight. This guy was playing on the third line at times this year, playing on the second line. He's a penalty killer. He's now on the power play. Very versatile piece. And you consider the move the Maple Leafs made yesterday, signing Bobby McMahon to that 2-year contract extension. He's a part of the future now. He's got 2 more years tacked on. Calle Yarncroke has 2 more years tacked on. We know Matthew Nyes, Nick Robertson very well, a big part of the future.
Oh,
a lot of those,
so with Robertson?
Well, maybe
sure
big
there.
part of the future, possibly. Who knows? He's at least an option for them. Those ancillary players for the Toronto Maple Leafs on the outside of the core, right? The Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, because Morgan Riley will be on the back end. And, Max Domi's a free agent. Tyler Bertuzzi's a free agent.
Yeah.
So the Leafs are looking for guys who can contribute on the fringes for the next couple of years as the salary cap continues to build. They're paying Nylander more next year. Obviously, the contract kicks in. Auston Matthews' new contract kicks in. So you bring Bobby McMahon on for $1.35 a year. It's a couple $100,000 more than Ryan Reeves is going to make next year. So we're not talking about a huge commitment financially. And I think it was a sound decision by the Toronto Maple Leafs. Makes a lot of sense. And I don't know if I'm Bobby McMahon, I think has played 50 NHL games. You could be, I wonder by the end of the season if he's looking at it as, maybe I should have bet on myself, pulled a little Fred VanVleet here. Or maybe you secure the bag when you can. Because, again, it wasn't long ago. It was a month and a day ago. Bobby McMahon was a healthy scratch.
Right.
And was only called in the lineup because John Tavares was sick.
Well, that's my point. My point would be everybody's praising this move. And look, it's relatively low risk and obviously relatively low stakes. So I'm not here killing the move, but I am here to say exactly what you're saying. Like, aren't we overreacted to one good month here? Because a month and a day ago, they were ready to scratch this guy. They were like, yeah, you don't fit in. You don't fit into this lineup. And he goes out and gets the hat trick, and he picks up some momentum and has had a great month, which is what he's had one great month as a Toronto Maple Leaf, 50 games as an NHLer, and now they're ready to do a 2-year commitment. I think that's a little bit of an overreaction, but maybe speaks to the desperation of this franchise and how they are so, in tough to find affordable pieces that can actually contribute. Kyle Dubas is really good at doing that. Hasn't gone as well for Brad Treliving to date. We'll see if he can do better.
Remember that Andreas Janssen contract that he signed? A 4-year deal worth $17.9 million.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one.
That was like, and again, I'm not comparing Bobby McMahon. This is a lot more low risk. And I think Andreas Janssen was bought out of that deal.
But my point, AK, is like everything that's over the minimum is more than you need to risk most of the time, right? Like why are they paying David Kampf more than David Kampf's doing minimum stuff for more than minimum
you
4-year
look
deal.
At Dewar, the kid they brought over from Minnesota.
Right.
He could act in the same role that David Kampf is acting in for all intents
Except right
and
now,
purposes.
David Kampf is your third line center.
He is, yes. And how that ultimately plays out through the next 18 regular season games into the Stanley Cup playoffs remains to be seen. I've been under the impression for a while here that Max Domi was not going to last as a second-line centerman. Maybe when Mitch Marner returns, they go back to that formation, bring John Tavares down to the third line where he was playing with Bobby McMahon, playing with Matthew Nyes, or maybe somebody else, however they decide to structure it. But that depth down the middle, I do wonder, like David Kampf as your third line center, Dewar as your fourth line center, John Tavares playing on the second line.
It's not ideal.
I really did think the Leafs may have found something going Matthews, Domi, and Tavares down the middle.
Yeah.
But again, I just don't think Domi, especially with Nylander and Bertuzzi, who he's playing with, were competent enough defensively in a Stanley Cup playoff series against the Florida Panthers or the Boston Bruins. I think you might have David Pastrnak jumping over the boards and seeing that trio out there. He's salivating at the opportunity to go up against those guys. And that's something you have to be cognizant of, right? And there was a couple of years ago, where David Kampf was centering the third line, and they were the shutdown line with Pierre Engvall on one of his wings against that Kucherov line with Braden Point. This was 2 or 3 years ago now.
I remember that, yeah.
And, had that worked to varying degrees of success. But I think what it speaks to is they need to be looking at anything and everything over these last 18 games. And that includes on the back end as well, and in goal, where Ilya Samsonov gets the nod tonight. And I do think it's an interesting spot for Samsonov because they've been going back and forth. Samsonov-Wall. Samsonov-Wall. And tonight, it's Samsonov who started Saturday night against Montreal, and he's starting tonight against the Philadelphia Flyers, a game you could watch on TSN4, I might add. Does that mean anything to you as far as the paradigm shift, perhaps, as far as the way the Maple Leafs perceive their goaltending situation?
Look, it's amazing how quickly it shifts, right? And how quickly the sentiment shifts, because every indication that this franchise was giving everybody that was around it, was watching it closely, was that until Joseph Woll had a couple of shaky starts and a couple of losses to the Boston Bruins, they were hoping Joseph Woll could be that guy. They were hoping it would be Woll who would take them into the playoffs and be their first round game one starter. Now, Joseph Woll is coming back off an 85-day absence. He's 3 games into it. I'm willing to give him a little leash here.
Yeah,
I'm not jumping down his throat saying, "What are you doing? What happened in this goal and that goal?" He's got to kind of ease his way back in to game speed at the NHL level, because you missed most of 3 months. You're missing some timing. But look, that's not how the Leafs feel. The Leafs are saying, "Wait a second here. We gave those Boston starts to Woll for a reason, no doubt about it." Because
there was intent behind that.
There was intent behind that.
They could have easily gone the other way.
Yeah.
Samsonov, at least one of those times.
For sure. But I think this is a statement that says, well, hang on here. Yeah, maybe we're asking too much of Joe Woll. Maybe we got to remember that who was the guy that got us over the hump in round 1 last year? Oh, that's right. He's still on the team. And it wasn't Joe Woll, right? It was Ilya Samsonov.
And he's playing great. I mean, Samsonov is 12-2 in his last 14 starts. The guy's been nails. 12-3, as you can see up on TSN4. 237 GAA, 911 save percentage, really quality numbers. I do think, Dave, that Woll, and this might be just a hunch I have, I feel like the Leafs believe that Woll has a higher upside.
That's exactly it.
As far as maybe a guy who could put the team on his back. Think about some of those games early on in the season where Woll was literally stealing the Maple Leafs points. And not saying Samsonov hasn't been doing that, but for whatever reason, I think the Leafs have maybe a little bit more cohesive defensively in the last month or so. And we think back to Morgan Rielly's suspension and how this team kind of banded together and they played a completely different style, a lot more of a defensively responsible style. And that's been very advantageous for the goaltender, obviously. But I think back to the early parts of the year where Woll, I think, a .916 save percentage before he got hurt. And I remember my radio partner in the morning, Carlo Koliakovo, saying this guy's a future Vezina Trophy winner, like that type of upside. And I mean, it's hard to really dispute the way that he was playing early on in the year. And when you have an injury of this type of significance, especially a high ankle sprain to a goaltender of this vintage, I mean, he's a young kid who doesn't have a ton of NHL experience. That's going to be a significant derailment. Now, is it enough to take the job away from him? I still think it's very much up in the air. If I was to handicap on FanDuel, I think you'd have to give Samsonov the slight edge, but I don't think it's that significant. I think a couple of weeks here, we could be discussing this goaltending battle in a very different light.
I think it changes so quickly, right? It changes with every start. It changes with every goal that goes in when you raise your eyebrows and say, maybe that shouldn't have gone in. Maybe he should have had that. It changes the equation. Like, that's literally how close it is between these two. Both of them have, warts, right? Like, the warts on Joseph Woll are clearly inexperience. And the fact that he's been hurt many times in his career, he's had a very tough time staying healthy as a professional. On Samsonov, I think as much as you look at those numbers, the 12-3 and the really good save percentage in recent games, the fact that he has shown the fragility he has shown this season, the fact that he has gone from really, really good to as bad as you can get pretty much, so bad that we waived you and nobody claimed you.
Nobody was interested.
Yeah. And then, by the way, we sent you to the minors, but we didn't even want you to go to the minors. We just wanted you to go away. We just wanted you to get away from this team, get away from this sport, and reset things. And it's a great story, and everybody loves this guy. Like, he's a very good teammate. Everybody, very likable guy in that room. Everybody's rooting for him. But you also, as you root for him, you know the good and the bad about him. And that's why I'm convinced that they really want Wall to be the guy, and yet they can't deny the results of Samsonov of late.
It will be Samsonov tonight. James Duthie, the host of the Maple Leafs on TSN, will join us around the table in about 15 minutes. Pierre LeBrun, TSN Hockey Insider, just after 5 o'clock. How about last night in Edmonton, where the Oilers put up a touchdown and an extra point on the Washington Capitals? And lo and behold, number 44, 45, and 46 for Zach Hyman, a natural hat trick, now on pace for 59 goals, is Zach Hyman. Is that the bigger story from last night for Edmonton, or is it the fact that Connor Brown finally gets off the schneid? 55 games without a goal until last night, and the one he scored, Dave, was not exactly, beautiful, like dangling.
Oh, come on, man.
Dangling through a bunch of defensemen. It just went off his skate, but listen, they all count the same.
That's right.
And maybe that'll be a catalyst for Connor Brown. Everybody loves Connor Brown in this city. A good Erie Otter, a good Toronto kid, but man,
he's one of the great guys.
It's been painful watching this. And he's playing with Adam Henrique and Evander Kane now. Yeah. That line looked effective last night for Edmonton. So you hope this is a start of something good here. But what Hyman's done, I mean, this is absolutely preposterous.
Well, last night was a great night for Leaf fans in some ways. It was a feel-good story on one hand because it's Connor Brown, and everybody loves Connor Brown. And he's one of the great guys that's come through Toronto sports in recent history. Everybody that covers the teams knows that. And he's a guy you can't help but root for. He's a humble guy, does a lot in the community when he's in the community. And so great, feel good. It was a feel bad story for Leaf fans because it's Hyman again. And you're like, wait a second, why did we let this guy go? Like, wait a second. We're talking about we need secondary scoring. We need someone other than Matthews to score. And we had this guy, and we quibble over dollars and cents with this guy for $5+ million a year when we're paying guys that aren't that good.
Tyler Bertuzzi
exactly
makes
that amount,
$5.5 million a year,
and that's one of the Kyle Dubas's legacies is the botch negotiation.
It's indefensible, really,
with Zach Hyman. And look, I mean, I give Zach Hyman so much credit. I've known him since he's a young kid, and nobody ever thought he was going to be this. I think maybe he thought it. But I don't even think he thought he was going to be approaching a 50-goal scorer in the NHL.
Below past 50. 55.
But, I mean, it's incredible. Like, all the groaning and moaning, he was constantly undervalued in this city. From the moment he was on a line with Matthews and you heard everybody moaning and groaning about how this guy can't play with Matthews, this guy doesn't have the skill to play with Auston Matthews.
Wasn't it Auston Matthews himself?
Well, it wasn't Auston Matthews who said it. I mean, there were a lot of moans and groans from around the team and around Matthews' camp that were suggesting that very thing. Mm-hmm. And look, it was, I remember writing a column talking to, I think it was Ray Ferraro saying that maybe Hyman's a little too high up in the batting order. And that's not to throw anybody under the bus. It was just it was a pretty much mainstream opinion that Hyman was batting too high in the batting order, and driven by the fact that the skilled players didn't see him as their equal on this team. And here we are. He's playing with not only the Edmonton Oilers, but the best player in the planet, in Connor McDavid. And not only is he playing with him, he's thriving with him and threatening to do stuff. What has he got? 4 hat tricks now. An Oiler hasn't had 4 hat tricks in a season since a guy named Gretzky.
That is crazy.
I mean, it's a great story, except if you're a Leaf fan and you're like, man, we let that guy get away. How did we do that?
Well, and there's been a lot of people who've talked about those negotiations between Hyman and the Leafs, and apparently a lot of the discontent stemmed from the lack of a no-move clause.
Yeah.
And that's what Hyman wanted, and the Leafs were like, we're not giving that to you. And that, in large part, apparently, is the reason he's no longer a Toronto Maple.
In other words, he wanted to stay in Toronto so badly, the Leafs didn't want him. No, you want to stay in Toronto.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe David Kampf has at least a modified no-trade clause. So.
Think about that. That I got to write that one down for the next Leafs book. Yikes. It's like here's a guy that wanted to stay in Toronto so badly, it turned the Leafs off.
Yeah, that's a turnoff. Sometimes, that is something that can happen, I guess. But it just boggles my mind how Zach Hyman is doing what he's doing on one of the best contracts in the NHL right now.
It's incredible.
Again, $5.5 million. The guy's going to score 55 goals. And with the salary cap going up, that contract looks better and better and better. And listen, Edmonton had Leon Draisaitl on that deal for 8.5 forever.
Yeah.
And he was scoring close to 50 goals, 100-plus points every single year. Now, that eventually comes to an end in the not-too-distant future here, but they've got Hyman locked up for a long term. I will say, the Connor Brown reaction from the fans, like the standing ovation, the throwing the hats on the ice, Connor Brown must have been looking up there like, listen, I appreciate it. It's a little bit, I'm not going to say embarrassing, but at the same time, I mean, Connor Brown's had some really nice seasons in the NHL. I think back to his time in Ottawa, he was really good. Toronto had some nice years.
Couple of 20-goal years.
But, man, like the standing ovation for like multiple minutes, too. I was watching that live like late last night, not doing the morning show. I could stay up a little bit later, Dave. And I'm like, ooh, I'm not sure how I feel about this one from Connor Brown.
No, you know what? I thought he handled it really well. Because that was my instinct, too. Like my wife has run into him a couple times because he comes around. My son went to the school where he went, and he's been around. He's the kind of guy that's around the school, talking to kids and talking to young athletes and wanting to help them in their journey. And so if the families get to know this guy, like that's the kind of guy Connor Brown is, right? He's not a guy that detaches himself from the community once he gets to the league. He's a guy that immerses himself in a community and gets to know people that are coming up behind him and encourages them. And I said to my wife, like, Connor Brown scored finally. And she's like, oh, yeah. But she hadn't been following the story. And I said, it was his first of the year. And she kind of went, ooh. First of the year in March. Yeah, I said, it's kind of tough, honey. And then I said, yeah, they gave him a standing ovation. And she went, ooh.
Yeah, kind of like worse.
Kind of sarcastic.
Like, a little bit. It's the Bronx cheer almost. It's a little bit of a Bronx cheer.
But I thought he handled it really well. Like, he stood there and took the bullets after the game. Like, he was like, yeah. Like, they kept asking him all the questions that you really should ask as a reporter, but they're hard to listen to as a player. Like, did you ever lose hope? Did you feel like quitting? Like, what the hell is wrong with you, by the way? Why are you 1 for 89 in shooting percentage?
Yeah.
In the league?
It's almost like you play a round of golf and you have like a round where you have 7 doubles and you've been hacking it around absolutely terrible. Then on 17, you drain a 50-footer for birdie and you shrug. You're like, well, I guess I was due for something like that.
Yeah.
And good for Connor. Listen, this guy could get it going in the second half here, down the stretch, and in the playoffs. Edmonton's going to give him an opportunity, and hopefully he's able to thrive with it.
It's kind of weird, actually. Like, when you look at, I was looking at his numbers, like 89 shots on goal. He finally gets a goal. He's hit a few posts. He's had one called back on replay. But this is a guy, like, he is, as he said last night, and people are saying, well, you weren't brought here to score goals. And he kind of corrected them, saying, well, actually, I've been a 20-goal scorer in this league. Like, that's part of my game. Like, I'm supposed to score goals, and I'm not. So it's obviously been difficult for me. But I thought he handled it so well, and he's handled the whole year well. Like, he's still one of the top forwards on the penalty kill. He's obviously out there in tougher situations because he plays a lot of defensive minutes against top competition. But yeah, he's not. He's obviously underachieving. Like, he should be scoring more, and he's not. So, you know what? Nice to see him get one, and let's hope, as many of his teammates said last night, they wouldn't be surprised if the floodgates kind of open now, and who would be, because you like to think good things happen to good people, and Connor Brown's a good guy.
Well, on the subject of handling things well, the Pittsburgh Penguins bobblehead handling with regards to Jaromir Jagr, not handled very well. We'll get into that on the other side with James Duthie, or perhaps it's some kind of ruse, some kind of farce from the Pittsburgh Penguins. I'm not sure. Duthie's plugged in. He'll know. He's going to join us around the table on the other side. Pierre LeBrun, TSN Hockey Insider, coming up. Rich Griffin as well from griffsthepitch.com. That's Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star. I'm Aaron Korolnek in for Brian Hayes. This is Overdrive on TSN 4 and TSN 1050. Overdrive continues here on TSN 1050, watching on TSN 4. Also on TSN 4 tonight, the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Philadelphia Flyers. The host of the Maple Leafs Hockey on TSN, the Maple Leafs Hockey. Listen to how I talk now.
Never been called that before.
It's our friend James Duthie around the table. What's up, JD?
I'm well, buddy. I got up this morning and did my usual Thursday morning First Up radio program segment, the First Up.
Yeah.
And it was Matthew Cause, and I'm like, finally, I've dodged Korolnek for an entire day.
Never, buddy. Never.
Coming to work, and look where I am.
Did he ask you about pies?
He did ask me
Oh,
about
okay. Yeah, it
pies.
sounds better. It is Pie Day, 3/14, right? So cause very much on top of
He asked me about do I prefer fruit pies or meat pies, and how is that even a question? I mean, I'm a big fruit pie guy.
Okay.
Meat pies, I can do 100% without it. Come on,
shepherd's pie? I do like a good
shepherd pie is like something your grandma gives you. It's a last resort meal.
You know what? I had a fish pie the other day. I was kind of skeptical.
That is gross, Dave.
I was skeptical,
Please keep this to
fellas.
yourself.
It was really good. It was really good.
Why would you have who even decided? The only exception I said this is beef Wellington. If you have it done right, is not bad. But
Well,
besides that,
this is a food of the
Wellington.
people.
look at I've really never had beef Wellington, but I had it at Super Bowl this year because they dragged me to that Hell's Kitchen.
Oh,
I guess
Gordon Ramsay.
that's the specialty,
That's right.
the beef
He's
Wellington.
he does.
So
the
I
beef
was
Wellington.
I was forced to order the beef Wellington by all
Okay.
the peer pressure at my table,
Okay.
and it was not bad.
All right. It was an authentic British pub. Like fish pie is apparently a British thing. I don't know.
Pies are desserts. Don't anybody out there listening, don't eat meat with crust.
No, it makes sense. There's a case to be made that the crust adds a nice layer. It's really delicious.
You're disgusting.
Absorbs the gravy.
James, what is going on with this Jaromir Jagr bobblehead story? So, and if you don't know what we're talking about, this morning the Pittsburgh Penguins tweet out that the entire shipment of Yagur bobbleheads were stolen from some truck. And then later this afternoon, the Penguins were tweeting out a video of Yagur in a car with the bobblehead, like driving around. Like, is
this a bit?
I think it might be a bit. Now, this is right up your alley as the bit master here at TSN. If it is a bit, how should we respond to the Pittsburgh Penguins ahead of their game tonight against the San Jose Sharks?
I've done some lame bits in my time. I would never do a bit that actually misled the news.
Well, apparently the police were investigating.
Yeah, people were reporting this on CNN and CTV News
Yes.
and all that. So yeah, I don't think you do that. It reminded me of like a scene from, I don't know, Better Call Saul,
Sopranos?
or Breaking Bad. No, it's got to have Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad had the tinge of weird comedy to it, where like the cartel would intercept the truck,
Yes.
and instead of drugs, they would get Jaromir Jagr bobblehead kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
Well, that was the joke with the Sopranos, right? Like Christopher Moltisanti and his. Are you a Sopranos guy, JD?
I am, but not like a diehard like some people. But I watched it all. Yeah.
I think I've watched maybe 6 or 7 times. But early, I think it was season 1, Moltisanti is hijacking all these trucks. They get their
Right.
suits.
Right.
And, Tony's getting his suit and Silvio Dante gets his suit and, they open up the truck.
That's when he's trying to make a name for himself,
Exactly.
right? Him and his buddy do it. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, you have the jumpsuit, you're ready to go. And Moltisanti was doing that. I do wonder, they open up the back of the truck and the Jaromir Jagr bobbleheads are sitting there. Probably not the ideal
If it's a bit
thing.
then that's a little long way to go.
I wouldn't be-
long way to go.
Yeah,
for
a
a bit.
couple weeks away from April Fool's Day.
Yeah. No,
If it's
no
not a bit, do you think that these thieves were trying to rob Jaromir Jagr bobbleheads, or they thought they were getting something else and they came across this? Because how could you sell 10,000 Jaromir Jagr bobbleheads on the black market?
I don't think you can. I think
Right?
that'd be a very difficult transaction.
It's a fantastic question, James. One I do not have the answer to.
So if it was a legit heist that went wrong, they thought they were getting something else, then that would have been, I would have loved to see the reaction shots
Right.
when they did open it up.
Or do you do it like the hackers do it, where you hold them for ransom?
Oh,
We will get you your
interesting.
17,000.
Send me a couple of
That's
Ethereum,
right.
and
Right.
then
Some
you could
Bitcoins.
have your Jaromir Jagr
That's
bobbleheads.
right. Yeah.
Now, the way Bitcoin and Ethereum are trending,
That's gonna be an
in a very
expensive
positive
transaction.
direction. It very well could be. James Duthie around the table with us here on OverDrive. So on the subject of bits, James, of course, the quiz belt, the O-Dog, Doug Gilmore
Right.
last Thursday
Right.
went off extraordinarily well. I forgot to mention the marching band as well.
Right.
How do you follow that up tonight against with the Leafs and the Philadelphia Flyers on TSN?
I will say this about my network and how much I love it, and my job is that I could suggest, first of all, to all the listeners who berated me throughout the year for not giving the belt to O-Dog, it was a bit, okay? People were angry each and every week when we found a way to not give O-Dog the belt. So
Look at the happiness
Love
of
it.
the O-Dog on
Love it.
TSN4. It's so good.
And sometime in
genuine.
January, I went to our producers, Mike Lane, Bill Dotson. I'm like, guys, I can't. We got to end this. I'm running out of ideas as to not give him the belt. And they said, you got to stretch it to trade deadline. And so then I said, we'll give it to him the night before the trade deadline if he earns it. But if we give it to him, I want to have a marching band. And the fact that I can say that half jokingly and they can actually get me a marching band.
And Doug Gilmour.
That was great.
Is, it was a triumphant night. I was happy for the kid. He was very, we thought about getting O-Dog his dad to bring him his belt. And O-Dog said he would have cried if it was his dad. He's an emotional guy, O-Dog. And I think that would have kind of ruined the bit if a guy is sobbing on the air.
Yeah, or I don't know. That would have been interesting. Maybe next year.
Okay.
Next year.
So the rule at Augusta is when you win the green jacket, I think you can take it the first year, but you got to leave it at the clubhouse.
Right.
Can you take the belt off the premises?
I don't know.
Vacation?
I've just realized that he's not here, that he's on vacation. Apparently, he has sent us some sort of video.
Oh.
I mean, this is why we didn't give it to him for 4 months, because the guy wins it once. I guess he won it twice, technically, because he won it on the trade deadline day, and he's disappeared for a week. I don't know. When I go down to studio, I'll find out if we have a belt, if we can give out a belt tonight, or if somehow it's been hijacked. We'll find out tonight.
That is a big tease for tonight's broadcast. Leafs and Flyers on TSN 4. No John Tortorella tonight. I mean, one of the big stars of the game. I mean,
And the quiz.
your former panel mate.
Imagine
here
if I
at
reached
TSN.
out to Torts and said, hey,
Come on the
I know
panel
you're free tonight. Why don't you come on and do the quiz? Like, how many expletives would be responded?
Send him a text
You
right
should
now.
do that.
Send him a
Just do
text
it.
right now.
Just do it.
So one of my one of the bits, one of the games, the last Philly-Toronto game was our game. And like I said, I was well out of ideas for snubbing O-Dog on the quiz. And so I thought I could go down to the morning skate and bring the belt and get Torts to put it on. And then we could roll the video, say, hey, we don't have the belt tonight. And we cut to Torts and he's saying, I hate the quiz, but I love the belt, right? So
a good idea.
I actually explained that in a text to John Tortorella. And I'm trying to find it here, but basically he came back and said, no, all business. Hope your family's good.
That's
there was no chance
That's very Torts.
that was going to happen. But it is, it does lack something when Torts isn't behind the bench. Just from even the reaction shots you get after Toronto goals or Philadelphia penalties, there is an entertainment value in Torts that I think we will all miss when he's done and finished with this game, and I'll miss it tonight.
Yeah, so golf season, Duthie. We got the Players' Championship going on. The Masters is in the air.
Yeah.
Less than 3 weeks away. I don't know if you guys were watching today. There was a hole-in-one on the Island Green, 17.
Ryan
Fox.
And he eagled the whole previous.
Yeah, first guy to do that. First guy to go eagle with a hole-in-one at 17. I was watching this thing. They before the tournament, they had the PGA Tour guys went out there for a typical day of play with amateur golfers at 17. And they wanted to kind of chart it, see how they all did, right? Just a bunch of hackers out there that pay $800 to play the
It is
place?
absurdly
Crazy
expensive
amount of money to play the
TPC
place.
Sawgrass,
It's like the highlight of your round is on 17. And you got to tee off 137 yards. It looks easy, and yet it's not somehow. So, Duthie, 95 amateurs go off on that hole, 102 balls in the water.
Yeah.
An average of more than one per player. I know you've played this hole. How did it go for you?
Yeah, first of all, by the way, they love that because they put cameras out there. And I think that they actually probably put the tee boxes. If you were there on a normal day, the Blues or the Whites would be over a little bit. It would probably play like 100, 110. And that I'm not sure that on a normal day they put it at the back, but they did it for that video.
Right.
And it was ludicrous. Like, I don't know, 10% of the players hit the green.
Yeah.
So when the Super Bowl was there, and I'm going to say 05, it was the Patriots and the Eagles, Donovan McNabb and Tom Brady. They had the party. So for people that listening, TPC is maybe 15 minutes, half an hour from Jacksonville, where the Super Bowl was. So they have a Super Bowl media party, which Aaron and Dave are both very familiar with every year. And they decided to hold it on the 17th hole of TPC. So there was a tent. Hootie and the Blowfish were playing. John Daly was playing with Hootie and the Blowfish. It was a great night.
Wow.
But they each gave us one shot for, I think it was either 10K or a car, the closest to the pin. So everybody in the media got one shot. Now, you're talking about football media, so there's not necessarily a lot of golfers.
You probably thought you had a decent chance.
Well, it was also about 5 degrees. Like, it was freezing. So you haven't swung. You're a Canadian. You haven't swung the club in like 3 months. You show up, they hand you some 9-iron, and you go hit the shot. I hit a gorgeous, towering Aaron Korolnek, best ever shot.
That's very
which
nice
how he
to say.
describes most of his towering pitching wedges. So it was Sunday pin on that back right. I hit the wood on the back right, kind of where Ricky Fowler hit when it stayed in a few years ago when he won. hit it again, and then dropped into the water. And the closest one at that point was like 35 feet. Now, the only postscript, which I should never add to the story, is that Farhan Lalji is not a golfer. And he said, you can have my shot.
Wow.
My second shot was like 4 bounces along the water into the wall. So I should have just quit while I was ahead.
Farhan gave you his shot. That is a very generous.
Very
He's a very nice guy. So if, I was an inch away from it stopping and being 10 feet, and Jimmy wins the car and I have a story forever, but instead, some writer from the friggin' Cincinnati Enquirer one.
Well, I mean, our man Adam Hadwin was not in very good spirits
goodness,
today.
what a moment.
And I think we have that on TSN 4. There it is.
Man.
The old club hurl into the water. I believe this is the 18th hole.
Yeah, so he hit his first shot and it just stayed out of the water.
Oh,
so
there
now
it is.
That
See
is
ya later.
We don't see the club toss that often.
Whoa.
For anybody listening and not watching, he threw that 40 yards into the water. And Adam is one of the most, you've covered him a lot, Dave. Like, he's a very mild-mannered, doesn't get too fiery golfer. Like, he would be one of the least guys on tour that I would expect to do that. And so, I don't know. I didn't see the rest of his round. I know he'd put it in the water on 17 as well.
And
So
he finished 3 over.
So it was probably bubbling away. And when you're 3 over after one, it's going to be tough to make the cut because everybody's going low. But there was a lot of interesting stuff happened today too. Rory hit it in the
Questionable
water.
drop.
It was a fair drop, but he had to basically beg Hovland and Spieth. Spieth was a disaster.
Your boy Spieth, James, real strict on the drops. Rory must have been like, dude, relax.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, Hovland was giving him a hard time too.
he was.
Like it's up near the turtles or whatever. Or they were talking about the turtles.
I know. It was
a very funny.
I will say
sequence.
the clip that they put up on the PGA Tour Twitter account was really interesting. Like, if you're a golf nerd like the three of us are, I'm listening for all the verbiage and I'm like, oh, this is the exact content I need. It's kind of like an episode of Full Swing. As it was happening, I really enjoyed it. Now, Nick Taylor, I mean, this guy is playing
He's
some
dialed in.
serious golf. He's 6 under. He's a shot
Yeah,
back.
we saw him, I think, twice on the coverage. Maybe.
Yeah, no, they didn't show him. But they'll be showing him on Sunday because this guy, I mean, he's 25th in the world.
Yeah.
He won in Phoenix. We know the RBC Canadian Open again is coming up at the end of May in Hamilton. He'll be one of the top contenders, no doubt. And I don't see him fading anytime soon. He's playing some really good golf, and this is they used to call it the best field in golf. Maybe not so much anymore with the whole partition in the sport. But Xander, Rory, Scheffler will be up there by the end of the day. Nick Taylor is playing the type of quality of golf, as good of golf as anyone's, maybe save Scotty Scheffler.
What's interesting, I find, is I think Nick, if you said 2 years ago, was kind of the forgotten Canadian golfer, right? Connor's probably got the most of the attention because he was in contention most. Mac Hughes and Hadwin were probably the three. Pendrith was an up-and-comer. And, Nick had won, but he kind of gotten forgotten. And now I think it's a point where if he continues to trend in this way, we could be looking at, it's going to be tough to get to Mike Weir's amount of victories. I can't remember what Weir's, he had quite a lot, like maybe 15 PGA Tour wins. Brooke Henderson, obviously. But he could be trending towards like the second or third best Canadian men's career ever. And if he was to win an event like this, which isn't a major, but is the closest thing to a major. I mean, Ames has this, right?
And he's dominant on the
Ames won
Champions.
Ames won this tournament by 6 strokes. When they talked about Scotty winning by 5 last year, Stephen Ames won this tournament by 6 strokes.
Incredible.
It was like that was the greatest day of his career. And now, he's incredible. But I'm a massive fan of Nick. Canadians, let's face it, we love them all, but they have a tendency to kind of foldo on Sundays. And Nick is the opposite. I think he just thrives in these situations. We saw it at Oakdale last year. We saw it at Phoenix this year. We saw it at Phoenix last year when he dueled John Rahm and Scotty Scheffler and almost beat them. So I think he has the perfect demeanor to compete. And like, if he's around Sunday in the last group, he won't be rattled whatsoever.
The experience.
It'll be super fun to watch.
Should mention Corey Connors 4 under through 9 today, so he's on fire.
Yeah,
Could be right there with.
He started on the back and missed like a 18-incher on 17 for par, which is his only bogey of the day. But to me, the perfect Sunday without Tiger is have Rory, have a Canadian like Nick Taylor in the mix. Scheffler is starting to win me over. He's boring as heck, but greatness is not boring. And if Scheffler, like if he's figured out the putting and he wins 6 times this year, he no longer is boring to me if he wins 2 majors. And And so I think it'll be really interesting to see if, I don't know if you saw the bit where they took him to 18 at Sawgrass early this week, and he started crying, talking about how he saw his wife in the gallery last year. That's all you want. You want to humanize the guy and see some emotion from him, and I think he'll become a lot more likable.
He's got that beard going right now as well. He
looks sharp.
It's a nice beard.
If you're missing John Rahm's beard,
that's right.
There's one just
That's the
as nice.
replacement. I think
That's right.
might have been part of the idea behind Scotty Scheffler.
That's right.
James, the Leafs and the Flyers, TSN 4. Thank you for coming by.
No problem, guys.
James Duthie, TSN, 8-time Gemini Award winner, or Canadian Screen Award. I was looking it up. I had to get the number correct from my man, JD. I will talk about the Yagur bobbleheads. Where are they? Plus the Raptors. A disappointing performance against the Detroit Pistons last night. Overdrive continues. TSN 4, TSN 1050. Overdrive is brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. It's Aaron Korolnek and Dave Feschuk in studio. We'll talk to Pierre LeBrun, TSN Hockey Insider, just after 5 o'clock. Maybe LeBrun has some info on this Yagur bobblehead saga, which no one really knows if it's real or kind of just a ruse to generate interest in the Pittsburgh Penguins. Maybe Kyle Dubas is so desperate for the media to get away from this Sidney Crosby is leaving Pittsburgh conversation. Is like someone say the bobbleheads were stolen tonight and we can build something around that just to cause a distraction from the media. Maybe that's it. Maybe
Something
that's
to be said for it. There it is.
Yeah, Yagur.
This is what leads you to believe it could be a ruse.
So, again, the story is that this morning, 18,000 bobbleheads, according to the Pittsburgh Penguins Twitter account or X account, were stolen.
Cargo theft.
Again, Christopher Moltisanti, season 1 of The Sopranos. And then later this afternoon, the Penguins come out with this video of Yagur with the seatbelt around one of these bobbleheads driving to the rink. So what's the real story here? I don't know.
I have no idea.
But again, how you would sell these bobbleheads, I have no idea. LeBron will know. LeBron is digging deep into this for us. He's going to answer the question.
And the weird thing is, what they're doing in recompense to the fans who they still hope come to the game against the wonderful San Jose Sharks.
Nice pass.
Isn't that a matchup made in heaven? So they want people to still come to the game, so they're going to give out a voucher to get the bobblehead eventually. But how can they do that if they don't know where the hell the bobbleheads are? The bobbleheads are
mass production of 18,000 new Yagur bobbleheads.
Well, I guess that's is that where they're going here? They got insurance on the other 18,000. They'll collect the insurance on their stolen 18,000 and whip up a new 18,000. I guess that's what they're going to do.
That's their only option, I believe. Brian Boyle will join us after 6 o'clock. He had a bobblehead night for the New Jersey Devils back in the mid to 2010s, I guess you can call them. So we'll get some bobblehead stories from Brian.
But if you happen to be the Sopranos in this equation, and you were the guy that knocked off this truck, like how disappointed are you that you now have in your hands 18,000 disposable collectibles?
You can't sell them.
You can't.
You need the only people you can sell them to is the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah. So is it a ransom situation?
It's a ransom situation.
You're holding your bobbleheads hostage.
Send us some Bitcoin so it can't be traced. And make it happen. I don't know.
What's the ransom on 18,000
That's a great question. There's so many questions, so few answers. We'll effort to get to the bottom of it as best we can. The Toronto Raptors last night lose to Detroit. Oof, as if it couldn't get any worse.
You believe that?
I can. Yes, the Raptors are an abhorrent team right now. That's not really breaking any news. Scotty Barnes and Pirtle and RJ Barrett out of the lineup.
The tank is on.
It's a pure tank.
Yeah.
Like there is no denying it now. RJ Barrett quickly. I feel like they're just going to rotate games off. Like you lose to Detroit. Jalen Duren had a 2020 game.
He's been playing well.
He's been playing very well. No, exactly. He's not Hakeem Olajuwon all of a sudden.
Chamberlain.
No, and that's the type of numbers he put up against the Toronto Raptors. The guy had a double-double in the first quarter. This is just what it is, man. Like, this is what the final 18, 19 games of the regular season are going to be for the Toronto Raptors. Very difficult to digest. And I don't think Scotty Barnes is coming back. Wouldn't really line up with the idea that they are in full tank mode. Again, the Raptors finished with the 6th worst record in the NBA. They have a 46% chance to keep their draft pick. If they finish with the 7th worst record, it's a 32% chance. It's really one or the other. They're going to finish 6th worst or 7th worst. They're battling with the Memphis Grizzlies, and it's kind of bringing me back to the early 2010s, some of those dark days, because last night for the Raptors, I mean, it's the first time they're 20 games under 500 since April 1st, 2013.
Wow.
So it's been a long time, almost 11 years since the Raptors have been this bad. But that was the shift. Right now, you could argue Is it a year too late? 2 years too late?
Yeah.
I think that's a very fair argument to be making. And there's a lot of people around this basketball team, around this city, who are saying this should have been done last year. You could be a year ahead of this. But
without a doubt.
They didn't. They didn't do it. Instead, they were buyers of the deadline instead of sellers. Jakob Poeltl traded for, and this whole first-round pick fiasco.
The Poeltl thing
just looks worse and worse and worse. Because, again, last year, there was a world in which they traded Anunoby and Siakam and were vying for Victor Wembanyama as far as the lottery sweepstakes go. Instead, now they're just trying to keep and hold on to this sixth pick in this draft, which apparently is no good.
And when they traded for Poeltl, what did Masai Ujiri say? We believe in these guys. He believed in them so much they punted on him less than halfway through the season. So it made no sense. It was a weird timeline, and it set them back considerably.
We have Pierre LeBrun standing by, our TSN Hockey Insider, kickoff hour number 2. Rich Griffin as well. We'll talk some Jays with him. What type of early season expectations can we have for Alek Manoah, considering some of the time he's missed in the spring? Brian Boyle still to come, and we'll talk to Lawrence Applebaum, live from the Players' Championship, the CEO of Golf Canada. That's Feschuk. I'm Korolnek. You're watching TSN 4 and listening on TSN 1050 OverDrive.